back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys! So I am here today to review two books for you. Both of them are science fiction and both of them are books that I really enjoyed. So I would highly recommend both of these to you. I'm going to start off by talking about this one, Empire of Silence, which is by Christopher Rucchio? Not really sure how you say that, I apologise. And then I'm going to talk about Adrian Tchaikovsky's Children of Time after that. So let's get started by talking about this one. So I actually listened to the majority of this on audiobook, although I did dip into the physical edition too, and I am really glad that I did pick up the audio because I think this works in a kind of chronicler way, and it is a big chunky book, as you can see, much like Name of the Wind is. And this is kind of almost a sci-fi version of that because you have a man called Hadrian Marlowe whose life story you are following throughout the events of this book. And he is kind of telling us and recounting what has happened in his life. And it very much reminded me a little bit of that style. The audiobook narrator is really good. They do a lot of intonations and accents really well, so I would highly recommend the audiobook if you are interested in audiobooks. And the story itself is told from one main character's point of view, and that is Hadrian Marlowe, so it's quite good to have lots of accents and other bits coming in for the other characters because otherwise it would get a bit boring. So I really liked the narrator. What I like about this is that it feels a little bit like The Name of the Wind in that we have a main character who is reminiscing, they are telling us their story, and therefore it is left open for interpretation, it's left open for lies and mistruths and miscommunications come across, and I think that's a really interesting way that writers can manipulate the reader, and I think that the author of this book knows that and is doing that very well. Hadrian's story starts out fairly simple. He's a young lord and he is expecting to take over the throne or the lordship from his father when his father announces an heir, but of course it's not that easy, and his father actually ends up choosing his brother over him to become the heir, which throws his whole life plan off. He has been in training to become the kind of ruler for many years, and he thinks that he is going to get that opportunity, and then it is ripped away, and he doesn't really know what he wants to do. He has some ideas of things he was intrigued about. He wants to go and study with this certain alien population, and when his father basically disowns him, he is essentially chucked out from his family and has to escape them in secretive ways in order to try and build a life for himself outside of everything in the universe he's ever known, away from his father and mother and other people he's always grown up with. His mentor is accused of doing something terrible to help him escape and to basically set him up to fail, which is not strictly true, but Hadrian is left with no choice and has to flee to get away from all the tyranny surrounding him and get away from his father and get away from everything that his father wants him to do, which is completely at odds with what he wishes to learn about and study. As Hadrian is forced to flee, there are of course many places that he can go in a universe this big. Humans have populated the galaxy, they have gone basically to almost every planet and taken over, and it's a huge expansive set of worlds. However, he is a young lord, and although that means he has resources, it also means those resources come from his father, and unless someone in his family is willing to help him, he's not going to get very far. And we quickly learn that although he does have people in his family who are rooting for him and people who are willing to go the extra mile to help him, it's not all quite as it seems, and Hadrian basically ends up getting very lost and very into some dark circumstances. He ends up on a planet that he's never been to, a planet he's never studied, somewhere he just doesn't know the customs, doesn't fit in, and he has to basically rebuild his life from there and make something of himself, which is what he does over the course of this book. So it is really a kind of big encompassing story. It expands across different worlds, across different timelines, and we see Hadrian as he develops and grows into a young man and someone who has more of an aim and a purpose by the end of the book. I've heard this book be compared to Dune and quite a few other sort of big epic science fictions and stuff, but for me I think it most reminded me of, as I said, The Name of the Wind, but also Blood Song by Anthony Ryan, because it's got that single narrator who's telling you their story, and it's done in an epic way, and it's the whole book them telling you their life story. And I don't know, I find it hard to really connect with a character, but I think when I do, it has to be done really well, and I really do think this is done very, very well. We get to see Hadrian as he faces some really terrible times. He gets beaten, he sees torture, he gets betrayed. There's loads of things that happen to him that are really bad. But with that being said, he is still a really wonderful character throughout. He's a developed character, someone who thinks a little bit more before acting, and someone who doesn't make, I mean, when he's young, he makes rash decisions, but when he grows up, he doesn't so much, and he thinks and he ponders and he comes up with plans and ideas. And I like that about him. He's kind of pushed along by the waves of his legacy, and he's someone who's just trying to stay afloat at times. He's trying to basically learn an entire new culture and fit into that, but he's also someone who is trying to steer clear of his past. I will say that there are some scenes in this book which are involving aliens, and they're pretty graphic and pretty gruesome and probably not something everyone is going to like. On the whole, I really enjoyed this. It's a long story, it's a big epic story, but I think it's a really solid beginning, and I definitely want to read the next one when it comes out, so I'll be on the lookout for it. And I would highly recommend it, especially if you are looking for a big, epic, space, kind of grand story, I suppose. It's not really like a story about battles and warfare, it's more about this one person and how they've dealt with things, and I really like that. So I gave it a 4 stars, and I would definitely recommend it. The next book I want to talk about is Children of Time, which is by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This book is one I heard about ages ago when it won, I think, the Hugo Award, and it was really highly regarded and recognised by many other awards in the same year that it came out, so I definitely wanted to read this. However, I had not read any Adrian Tchaikovsky before, and I wasn't really sure if I would like him, so I left it a few years, and then I fairly recently read Guns of Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which I loved. If you've seen my review, you'll know that. And I, of course, wanted to dive into more of his stuff, so I picked up Children of Time next, and I'm really glad I did so because it is just wonderful. It's really, really great. This story is set again in space, hence why I've grouped the two of them together, and we follow quite a few different characters in this one. The first of those being Dr. Ivana Kern, who is a scientist. She is up in space developing a terraforming project where she is hoping to basically release some sort of nanovirus onto a population of monkeys on a planet that is basically almost the same as Earth, and hyper-evolve them. Basically get them to a sentience far faster than humans evolved from monkeys using this virus. That is her life goal. It's something she's been studying for and working on for many years when we join the story, and we follow what happens when they are about to release this virus and release the monkeys, and it all goes completely wrong. We also end up following Ivana later on as she ends up circling the planet that she thought would be the home of the monkeys for millennium untold, and she thinks there are monkeys down there, but it turns out there might be more than just monkeys. The second POV is from the Gilgamesh, which is a ship that basically evacuated Earth when everything went terrible, and it holds a large amount of the population all in some sort of cryo sleep, and then there's a couple of key crew members who get woken up if anything happens. If they come to a planet or if they have to make a decision, then the machinery of this big ship will wake them up. So we follow a couple of people on there who are key crew members as they are trying to get to a safe destination where they can basically repopulate a planet and hopefully restart the human race, because Earth has gone pretty bad. And finally we have the POV, which is based on the planet itself, the planet that Ivana Kern circles for millennium, and this planet is inhabited by some pretty bizarre creatures. Namely, there are spiders there who are sentient, and other beasties as well. So we follow generations of spiders and other creatures as they evolve on this planet, as they basically have this nanovirus input into them, and as they develop into something much more than any spider on Earth has ever become, thank goodness. They are quite creepy, but I don't think it's a book that you should steer clear of just because you don't like spiders, which is admittedly what I was doing for quite a while. because there's not actually an awful lot of graphic description of the spiders, and I don't think that you have to think of them as a spider as much as just a very interesting, unique being. Adrian Tchaikovsky does a great job of kind of writing an alien creature. This spider is something that we can recognise because we have spiders, but it's also something that you wouldn't recognise if you were speaking with them. They have a completely different evolution, therefore they have evolved in ways that we could never have anticipated. Their thought processes are different, the way they do things is different, and it's really interesting and fascinating to see how Adrian Tchaikovsky has managed to basically create this entirely new species and give it a life and a voice and believability, credibility that works so well in the story, and you kind of end up almost wanting them to be the victors. So we basically have those three different perspectives. We have Iverna's ship, the Gilgamesh, and the planet, and each of them shifts between throughout the story, and we get a very long history of humanity and different evolutions of the spiders and creatures over a long time. So we follow these 3 points of view over many thousands of years because of the technology and how advanced it is and how many people can survive for so long and so forth. I have to say I didn't connect fully to the spiders or the humans. I found it a little bit hard to completely attach to any of them because the spiders are so foreign and then the humans are so desperate and far removed from what I could see myself being that I found it a little bit hard to really connect with them, but I still think the story is fascinating, and the ideas that it plays with, the power struggles, the way that people interact when they're desperate, and the way that alien creatures have to interact was just fascinating, and I honestly really do recommend it. I loved seeing the way that the story unfolded and the histories that intermingled and intermixed with one another, and how everything was just connected in ways that you couldn't necessarily anticipate. The play out at the end was something I didn't necessarily see coming, but I think was very fitting, and it just worked as a whole really well. Again, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, and I would thoroughly recommend checking it out. So that is my review of those 2 books. Let me know in the comments whether you've read either or if you plan to pick them up. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in my next video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.